Hello again from the allotment. Hope you're all doing well. It's been a very action-packed couple of weeks here on the plot. Since my last video, I was just coming off appendix surgery, so I couldn't really do very much. I was kind of carefully wandering around the plot and sort of trying to case out what was going to happen next. And of course, what needed to happen next did happen next, which is completely clearing the whole plot with a brush cutter. I do have to say it feels a little bit bittersweet doing all of this trimming and all of this cutting back. It was so beautiful when it was just natural and wild. Now, I was kind of in two minds about doing this because, of course, wildlife is a big part of this space. This is something that I want to cultivate and grow, continue growing on this space. But because the plot was so overgrown, it was very difficult to even see what I was working with. And actually, when you take on an allotment here in the UK, you have a 3-month probation period where you have to kind of show that you're going to look after your plot, care for it properly. And in the case of this one of the probation sort of stipulations was that the plot needed to be cleared back. Obviously keeping in mind that it's going to be used for wildlife in part, and of course for cultivating plants, fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. And it is a unique plot in that it's covered in mature heritage fruit trees. So I did have to do that clearing back, and I have to say I'm really glad I did, because I can really see the space, the geography of this space, how it's laid out. Now, whilst I was in two minds about doing this initially, I wanted to keep all that lovely wilderness feel. It is important that it is stripped back so I can see what I'm working with, to clear a lot of the rubbish. My gosh, guys, there was so much trash and rubbish all over this site. So a lot of that needed to be cleared out. And in fact, what's that? Ah, it's a fox. They're all over the place, I guess, digging up people's vegetables, but also looking after the rat population. I did find some new friends whilst clearing the plot. I'll drop that footage in here so you can see some of the buddies that I've made already. So I was very, very careful with the brush cutter, and no casualties, thank goodness. I was watching very carefully. So it's great that this space is now cleared back, so I can just get a feeling for what's going to go where, which bits are going to be wild, which bits are going to be cultivated, and so on. And it's just been a huge undertaking, just getting this place sort of, pared back to that kind of rudimentary casing out what is going to go where. And that allows me over the coming months, over the winter, to start planning where I'm going to landscape, how I'm going to landscape, and so on. And in fact, I'd be really appreciative if anyone has any ideas or thoughts or comments or suggestions. Please do let me know. Drop them in the comments, or give me an email or a message on Instagram or something, because usually I'm full of inspiration, and I have a lot of inspiration, but it's quite overwhelming as well to try and figure out what I'm going to do, where, how, on a limited budget, of course. Environmentally friendly, of course. There's a lot of things to kind of consider. So any thoughts will be greatly welcome. I guess with all big projects like this, you just take one step, and the second step, and the third step, you go one step at a time. One of the next steps that I absolutely need to figure out is somewhere where I can enjoy my little coffee. I'm like, been busting my guts over the last couple of weeks down here. So it'd be nice to have a little corner to just relax and enjoy the peace and tranquility of this space. The other small win, of course, has been putting a temporary lock on the shed door. Every time I came down here, that beautiful shed behind me, as much as I love it with all the moss on the roof and everything, was just, the door was hanging open. It was just a total mess, just like chaos. So you just come down and the front door is open, it's just like, ugh. So I've put a little bullnose bracket on that, and I've got a lock. Now, it's absolutely not lost on me that after spending half an hour fixing up the door on this blooming shed, that there's a window, an open window, right there next to me. So I'm gonna figure that out now. But of course, this is just a temporary solution just to kind of keep some of my cheaper sort of shovels, spades, rakes, that kind of thing on site. So I don't have to keep dragging them forward and back from my little home shed. And hopefully things are pretty safe here. There are some robberies. I think the person who runs the allotment said that they have about one robbery every year, and it's usually small tools and things like that. Things like drills, small hedge cutters, things to that effect, that get stolen because they're easy to move on Facebook Marketplace and so on. So hopefully I have some good luck. I am tucked away the very corner of the allotment, and it does look particularly wild down here, so hopefully I get a little bit of good fortune, at least until I manage to fix up this shed behind me and get it completely safe so that I can store all my tools, even the more expensive ones. I've also uncovered another very exciting feature in the plot, which is another pond. So we had this lovely wildlife pond, which needs quite a bit of tidying up and care and attention. But I found another wildlife pond as well. Now guys, surprise, surprise, there is a second pond in the allotment. When I first got this plot and I was walking through, I kept tripping on this like white plastic thing and kind of falling into it. A tiny little like hole. I was like, oh God, it's like a barrel or something. Nothing could have prepared me for this. A second pond. It's quite a large pond, like 6 foot by 5 foot. Now it's made of one of the pre-formed pond molds, and it looks like quite an old fiberglass ones. Apparently the fiberglass ones are better than the plastic ones, so I've heard in my sort of pond investigations in the past. There are lots of cracks, lots of holes, lots of splits. It looks like it's been repaired in some parts too. I'm going to have a look at salvaging this, but I really don't think that this mold is going to work, unfortunately. But a massive pre-dug hole. There's actually quite a lot around the outside as well that's sort of been dug too. Why not just put a liner in? So I'm going to actually see if I can build a second pond on the spot, as if like I don't have enough work to do in this space. But I think it would be so nice to have a second pond. And they say that if you have two ponds, or like a river and a pond next to each other, it creates like a wildlife network or a wildlife walkway or a wildlife conveyor belt between the two. You know, you see the kind of the invertebrates like flying from one to the other. Of course, frogs and toads kind of can intermingle, and it creates a lot more action, which is exactly what I want. So another job for hopefully the winter, amongst all the other jobs that I have to do. But great that there's a second pond. And who would have thought that this tiny plastic sort of, you know, thing in the ground that kept tripping me up would turn out to be this big, massive pond. It's like this plot just keeps on surprising me. I just don't know what I'm going to dig out next, which is in some ways a little bit daunting. It does fall within the wildlife segment of the plot. Of course, the whole plot will be wildlife friendly, but you know, the top part is the part that's been sort of specifically allocated for wildlife. So we'll have two ponds. Of course, that's another big job, but something that I'm very interested in doing. I really want to do that. So hopefully that will happen at some point over the coming weeks and months. Certainly before February, that's when frogs start to kind of really get going here in the UK and Ireland. So that will be a big priority over the winter months.